Hi, it's Sandy Wiley. Welcome to my mental health channel, 50 Shades of Black and White, where I talk about my mental illness, borderline personality disorder. I talk about other mental illnesses and personality disorders, narcissism, bipolar, schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety attacks. I talk about therapies, my 20 years in therapy with unethical psychologists who sexually, emotionally, physically, and mentally abused me. I come on here to wipe away the stigma of mental illness, but I come on here only as a patient. I do not have a degree in psychology. I am not a licensed therapist, so I can only share my personal journey. I'm 58 years old, and I can share what it's like having borderline personality disorder and a host of other things that I grew up with. The only thing I ask of everyone watching who comments, please, I welcome comments. I love comments. I will get back to you and answer your comments, but please be kind. Be kind in the comments to me. Be kind to everyone else. Be kind to yourself. That's all I ask is kindness and respect. I will not tolerate anything less than that. So, if you like what you see, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, welcome. And please subscribe. It's absolutely free. Now, today I'm going to broach upon a topic that I've never touched upon before. I have talked about my life having borderline personality disorder, about my narcissistic abusive mother who used to beat me and belittle me, about my paranoid schizophrenic father who was in and out of mental institutes and who left home when I was really little. But I never broached upon the subject of me being a parent having borderline personality disorder. So this video I'm going to talk about how I was, as a mother, a parent, raising two children, being with this severe crippling personality disorder. So unlike other mothers, because I have borderline personality disorder, I could not regulate my emotions. That's the major thing of it. So there was utter chaos in the house at all times. A mother who does not have borderline personality disorder can accept things, the everyday nuances of life, or disappointments in life, or even tragedies in life, and try to be very mindful of their young children. Try not to discuss it in front of their young children, like 2 or 3 years, 4 years old. Try to be, calming, maybe behind closed doors, with their husband, or, with their best friend, or somewhere away. They might, but they try to shield their children from whatever it is that they are feeling. Now, I did not shield my children at all. They saw me hysterical. They saw me screaming. They saw me swearing. They saw me in a fit. I never hurt my children, but they saw their mother out of control. And this is not a healthy environment. The parents are the adults. The parents are supposed to be in control. Because of my mental illness, I had no control over my feelings, over my emotions, and I always acted out. I always acted hysterical. I always acted out of control. Of course, being severely abused by the psychologists I've been with, sexually abused, my psychologist having sex with me, fighting with me on the phone. My son overheard this because we had a very small house, a ranch house, so everything's on one level. And of course, my psychologist contributed to that by severely abusing me. I felt even more dysregulated. But I'm going to go into one incident where how my severe borderline personality disorder severely affected my son. I was going for a breast biopsy. They spotted something suspicious on my breast, and I was really scared. Now, any woman would be scared if they called you back after you had a mammogram and they told you, we see a suspicious, mass on your breast and we need to do more testing. You need to come in for a biopsy. Now, come on. If you're a woman out there, that's going to scare you, the chance that you have breast cancer. And they told me I had a 20% chance of it. But unlike the other woman, they probably would, deal with it somehow without involving their child. So their child wouldn't have to go through that. But see, I did not. I involved my child, and he was very young. I can't remember how young he was. He was in grade school. Maybe he was 6, 7. I don't know this specific age, but he was pretty young. What I did was I pulled him out of school for the day, and we went to New Hampshire. We went to Lake Winnipesaukee. This was after I had the biopsy and waiting for the results to see if I had breast cancer. Now, another parent would have never pulled their child out of school. They would have waited like an adult for the doctor to call. I didn't know when the doctor was actually going to call. And, I was like out of my mind. And to me, the ocean is very soothing. It's very calming. So the reason why I pulled him out and didn't just go alone to New Hampshire with my husband is because he got out of school, I forget, around 2 or 2:30, and Lake Winnipesaukee is like a couple hours drive. We would have never been home to be able to pick him up. And he was pretty young. I think he was 6 or 7. He was pretty young, so there would be no one there to pick him up from school. See, we didn't have anyone we could rely on to do that. So in order to do this, trip to the, well, it was a lake. It wasn't an ocean, Lake Winnipesaukee. But in order to do this lake trip, we needed to pull him, pull him out of school because it would be a whole day thing and we wouldn't be home. I just wanted to keep my mind, I just wanted to calm. So I pulled him out of school because of it. And of course I was hysterical. I was beside myself. I didn't shield him. See, this is the whole thing. I did not shield my son from my personal trauma because as a borderline, I could not handle. I couldn't handle things like another person who is not a borderline who would have probably internalized what they were going through, or they wouldn't have brought their young child into the situation. They probably would have never even told their young child what was going on. They would have shielded, protected their child from what was going on. It turned out that it was benign, the mass. I did not have cancer. But see, my son was pulled out of school and went through all this theatrics of a mother being hysterical and out of control. And the end result was nothing happened. He could have been spared all that, went to school with his peers, and not known a thing. That's what I'm trying to get at, see? That I could not do that. I could not handle that situation maturely. In a mature way, I had to dump all my problems onto my son, pull him out of school for the day. He sees his mother hysterical. This is how I was. This is it. I'm going to die. You're not going to have a mother. This is what this little boy heard. I got cancer. I'm going to die. You're not going to have a mother. And can you imagine all of the anxiety, all of the pressure, that he felt during that period of time, whenever it was, when I found out I had the mass, to when I got the biopsy, to waiting for the results. We're probably talking about at least 3 days, 2 or 3 days at least, between all that, because they find, the doctor calls and you have to schedule a biopsy, then you go in for it, then you wait for the results. I mean, it's pure hell on earth. I'm sure it's not comfortable for any woman to go through what I went through, but here's the thing: they wouldn't have pulled their child in it all. They would have shielded their child from it. See? So this is how I just could not, I couldn't get a grip. I could not get a grip enough to shield my son from these things. And that was just one example. When I used to fight with the psychologist who had sex with me for 2 years, he physically abused me. My son was in the middle of that too. I dragged my son. Of course, that was my psychologist's fault. When he pushed me around and he pinned me down, spit in my face. This is a psychologist now who had sex with me while I was his patient, And my son heard this. My husband had to come and pick me up. And I was screaming. I was hysterical. I said he physically assaulted me. And my son was there. He heard this. He said, "Mom, promise you'll never see him again. Mom, I'm worried about you." A little child should not have witnessed this. Yes, it was the psychologist's fault that he abused a patient. And he got his just desserts. I went after him with the board, and I got a lawyer, and I personally sued him. There's a long story to that. But what I'm trying to say is that this happened living in the same house with my son. So my son was witness to the abuse by my psychologist. My son was witness to his mommy's having sex with her psychologist. Her psychologist is picking. He drove to my house every Saturday night in his convertible sports car, parked outside my house, and my son saw his mother going in the car with her psychologist and going to be gone all night. And, at that point, I think he was old enough. He was like a teenager or a young teenager. He knew what was going on, what we were doing. Every Saturday night, he had to have dinner alone with his father. Why is mommy doing this? Why is she going out with her, with her psychologist? Is that supposed to happen? Why is her psychologist hurting her? Why is mommy, you see? And the fights that I used to have with him on the phone, I'd be screaming with him, because I'd get very upset at something, because he was always hurting me. First of all, he was supposed to protect me. He was my psychologist. He was never supposed to have a sexual relationship. He wasn't even supposed to have a friendship with me. He was my psychologist. But I think that psychologists, the ones that are unethical, I think they're like predators, especially to borderline patients, because most of the time when you find out a psychologist has sex with their patient, a lot of times it's with a borderline patient. A lot of times, because a borderline patient can't regulate their emotions, and the psychologist takes advantage. An unethical one will take advantage, as if another one going in for something else wouldn't be as susceptible to that. See what I mean? But because we wear our emotions out on our sleeves all over the place, we're more likely, borderline personality disorder is much more likely to be abused by psychologists. Unethical, let me get that right. Unethical psychologists. So my son was privy to all that. Now, I don't know this. Luckily, my son has 2 bachelor degrees, one in public health, and guess what? He does have a degree in psychology. He's working full-time in the mental health field, and he's also going for his master's degree, and he wants to become a doctor eventually too. So But, I don't want to go into the psychology of him. He seems very level-headed, very educated. But you know, it's going to be hard because of what he grew up with. I don't want to talk about his personal life, but I'm sure that my style of parenting, not shielding him, being totally chaotic, not having any control over my emotions, having sex with my psychologist, being physically abused and mentally abused by him right in front of my son, and the fact that I did these things like pulling him out of school, and him knowing all about my breast biopsy instead of shielding him and not telling him, has and will have a greater impact, and it already has an impact on his relationships, on the kind of woman he chooses, that, the kind of, see, it will. There's no way that you can grow up in that kind of chaotic environment and it not have some kind of impact on you. So therapy was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I should have never, I should have never went to therapy. I should have never stayed in therapy. Therapy ruined my life. I turned into an alcoholic. My son too has seen me passed out on the couch after a big fight with the psychologist who had sex with me for 2 years. After we fought, I would go get the vodka and drink and pass out on the couch. Never had a drinking problem in my whole life until I was sexually abused by my psychologist. So see, I don't go to therapy anymore. Since I've stayed away from therapists and since I've stayed away from people, I can regulate so much better now. I don't get caught up in drama because there's no one to get caught up in drama with. I stay away from doctors. I stay away from people, friends and everything, so no one can hurt me. I concentrate on my sons. I have a severely handicapped son with traumatic brain injury. He got meningitis at age 4. I spend a lot of time with him. I spend a lot of time with my husband and my other son studying to be a doctor. I don't get caught up with other people, so there is no drama. I'm not screaming anymore. I'm not swearing. I'm not going into hysterics. I'm not dumping all my shit onto my son. See? So I learned to, set up boundaries. Boundaries are walls, When someone puts up walls, boundaries are walls. I've learned to put up boundaries. I've learned to put up walls now so that I will never get into situations like I did before. I'm much too smarter now. I'm 58. I've learned from my past and I'm never going there. But I wanted to come on and share what it's like as a mother who has borderline personality disorder and the impact it had on my son. It has impacted my son in relations with girls. I don't want to go into it, but of course it has to. There's no way that you could grow up in a chaotic household and not have, Now my husband is very calming, so at least he had one stable parent where I didn't. My father was schizophrenic and he had psychotic fits, rages, psychoses. He heard voices. He had hallucinations. He was in and out of mental hospitals. My mother was narcissistic. She used to beat me and curse me. She blamed me for her life, telling me it's all my fault that she has to stay with my nutty father, because if she didn't have me, she could just get out. It's just crazy, So, and she was hysterical. She swore. She threw things. She clawed me, left welts on me and everything. So I had my father, who was in and out of mental hospitals as a schizophrenic, my mother, narcissistic, who used to beat me and abuse me. So there was no stability in the household. At least my sons had a stable, calming father who didn't have any mental illness, who was very calm, who didn't scream and swear and throw things, and who would shield his children. He wouldn't dump, like me, dump everything all over the place, an emotional dumping ground, so to speak. I was just like emotional, junkyard a junkyard of emotions, and that's how my sons were raised. And therapy just only was like gasoline on that fire. But I just wanted to be able to share that with you, and because I never talked about that part of like being the mother part of having the mental illness, how it was to be a parent in that role. So that's about as brutal honesty as I can tell you. And if you have any comments, or if you're a parent who's a borderline, or was a child of a parent who was borderline, let me know in the comments.